Ford wowed the crowds when it released the newest Fusion, complete with Aston Martin styling and with the hybrid model high miles per gallon.
Yeah, but that's old news because this year you can buy the Accord hybrid from Honda.
Yeah, but Luke, I'm still not really sold on the Accord. I just think you get more car for the money if you go for the Fusion.
Honestly, Steve, I think you're wrong, but let's let the cars do the talking. Okay, I admit it. I've got to side with Steve here at least a little bit because I'd agree that the Fusion is the better looking car of the two. Let's face it, from pretty much every angle, it's an attractive looking vehicle. But don't let that scare you away from the Accord hybrid. No, because it's still a good looking car. Okay, so maybe it's not the most eye-catching vehicle on the road, but it's still very good looking, at least in my opinion. Specific changes to the hybrid model include blue accents on the grille and also the headlights, along with hybrid badging and 17-inch alloy wheels that are specific to the hybrid model. Aside from that, it's just an Accord, and in my book, that's hardly a bad thing.
Complete with these optional 18-inch wheels and chrome accents around the windows, this Fusion is a great looking car. Honestly, it looks a lot more expensive than it is, and for the price tag, this has to be one of the best looking cars you can get.
Of the two, the Accord's cabin has a much more premium look and feel. Compared to the Fusion, all the materials seem to fit better in the Honda, and while they both have plenty of hard plastics through the cabin, the Accord does a better job of hiding it. On top of that, the center stack is easier to deal with and more attractive. Where there's a flat black look in the Fusion, you get nicely placed knobs and dials in the Accord. Now, I'm not totally in love with this thing. To be honest, the beige interior drives me absolutely nuts. For example, if you look closely at the place where I'm resting my right elbow right now, you can see that it's already starting to accumulate skin oil and dirt, and it just looks dirty. This is a brand new car, and that really shouldn't be happening so soon. Worse still, hybrid models are paired specifically with the beige colored interior, and I just can't understand why you couldn't go with something like the black in the Fusion or on other Accord models. It's true that Steve has a little bit more rear seat headroom as well, but the fact of the matter is I've got more cargo space in the rear, and while the differences are honestly marginal between the two in terms of pure volume, the space in the Accord is much more usable.
The interior of this Fusion just isn't quite as nice as the one in the Accord. You get a lot of hard plastics, and the center stack just doesn't have that eye-catching design that you get if you buy the Honda. On the plus side though, the seats in the Fusion are a little bit more comfortable, and you get almost an extra inch of headroom in the back, although legroom is just about the same. Now when it comes to infotainment, this Fusion is fit with the My Ford Touch system. Now I have to say that it has improved quite a bit since it first came out, but it still lags quite a bit and it can be very frustrating to use. On the flip side, however, you get these two screens up here in the info cluster. Each one is controlled by an individual D-pad on the steering wheel, and they are easy to use and there's no lag. Now the first thing you notice when you jump in this Fusion to drive is the steering, and I quite like it. It's a lot quicker than it is in the Accord, and it makes this car feel like a better handler, at least to me, despite the fact that the Fusion weighs 66 pounds more than the Accord. Now under regular driving conditions, the Fusion isn't too bad, but once you put your foot into it and you make that little 4-cylinder engine rev up, it just sounds really coarse, really unrefined, and it just makes the whole car just feel a lot cheaper than what it really is. So there are a few systems on this Fusion that you can't get with the Accord, namely automatic parallel parking and active lane keep assist. Now while you're driving, that lane assist, what it does is when you hit the line, it will actually slowly bring the car back into the middle of the lane. Now it's more of a suggestion, it doesn't really interrupt the driving too much, but if you're drifting off a bit, it will catch you and it will wake you up to the fact that you need to pay attention to what you're doing. Now if you remember, Ford actually revised its fuel economy estimates for the Fusion Hybrid. It used to be pegged at 47 miles per gallon combined, but they dropped it down to 42 miles per gallon combined. And on our test loop this morning, we actually managed a solid 46 miles per gallon, which is pretty impressive.
One of the biggest differences between the Accord Hybrid and the Fusion Hybrid is the level of noise that makes it into the cabin. So it's quite a bit more quiet in the Honda product than in the Ford. And part of that has to do with the fact that there just isn't nearly as much engine noise making it into this car. And I gotta chalk that up to Honda's sophisticated new hybrid system. Honda's old IMA hybrid system was relatively rudimentary and wasn't able to power the wheels independently with either electric or gasoline power, and that's not true in this car. In fact, in this car, by default, you're using mostly electric power, and there's an EV mode just south of the shift lever that allows you to go fully into electric power, while the engine acts as a generator, putting power back into the hybrid system. Combined total output for this car is a little bit more than you get in the Fusion, and while the differences there are arguably not that big, there is an appreciable difference in how smooth the acceleration is in this car compared to the Ford. But that's not the only place where the Accord has an advantage over the Fusion, because the brakes in this car are considerably better to use than in the Ford. In the Fusion, they have sort of a rubber band feeling, and in the Accord, it feels a lot more like what you're used to feeling in a normal car, as opposed to sort of the typical regenerative braking feeling you get in most hybrids. It's true that the Fusion is offered with a wider range of features, but there's one thing that you can't have in the Ford, and that's Honda's lane watch camera. To recap, in case you're not aware of what that is, Honda puts a camera on the right-hand side view mirror, and when you either activate the turn signal or press a button on the turn signal stalk, the top screen out of the two that's on the center stack turns into a monitor, and it actually gives you a wider viewing angle than the mirror itself can. It's a safety feature that, at least in my opinion, should be on every car, not just Honda's. And finally, fuel economy, because after all, we're talking about hybrids today. So what do we get? Well, believe it or not, I'm averaging 51 miles per gallon, which is better than the overall estimates for averages and even better than the city fuel economy, according to the EPA. Mind you, we were on a pretty gentle loop here, so both cars are probably getting a little bit better than what you should expect in real-world driving situations, but it proves two things. One, that both cars are capable of getting their EPA estimates, but number two, they're both capable of beating them too, and honestly, that's incredible.
So in the end, the Fusion has a cheaper base price, a wider array of options, and it finally lives up to the fuel economy that Ford advertises.
But the Accord is available with most of those features. Also, it has an interior that vastly outclasses the Fusion, and most importantly, it gets much better fuel economy.